Since you asked me, like, what's the difference between like how your father raised you and how Gabriel raised and how Gabriel raised, basically I'm doing the complete opposite. I'm making sure that boy wakes up every day, tells himself, I'm confident, I'm smart, I'm kind. Because when you don't have that, you're broken.
Welcome to Vulnerability Muscle, the empowering podcast challenging norms and guiding you to find strength and power through vulnerability. I'm your host, Reggie D Ford. In a world that often portrays vulnerability as a sign of weakness, I believe it is a source of tremendous strength and authenticity. Through insightful conversations and thought-provoking interviews, Vulnerability Muscle aims to redefine vulnerability and help listeners develop a new perspective on their own lives. Each episode of Vulnerability Muscle delves into a variety of topics such as mental health, social issues, and mindset shifts. We explore the power of vulnerability in healing, building resilience, and promoting personal growth, as well as fostering meaningful connections. This podcast provides practical tools and strategies to navigate life's challenges, overcome adversity, and create more inclusive and just environments for all people. Hey, y'all. In this episode, we have Denis Bermudez. Denis is an amazing man. He's a father. He is an entrepreneur. He is a mentor to so many people. But I think one thing that stood out about this episode was just the emphasis on parenthood, and especially fatherhood, as Denis recounts his relationship with his own father, and the way that has impacted the way that he parents his children. Denis immigrated from Ecuador when he was 10 years old. Shortly thereafter, barely knowing English, enrolled in some of the best educational institutions in the United States, and went on to have a fantastic career, but comes back to how childhood trauma has impacted his life, has impacted the way that he lives and thinks and interacts with people. And I'll be honest, this was one of my favorite episodes because it was embracing vulnerability to its core. Both Denis and I cry in this episode. And I think even though we have different backgrounds, you'll see a lot of similarities in his story and mine. I cannot wait for you all to listen to this. So with no further ado, let's embrace vulnerability with Denis Bermudez. Man, what's up? Denis Bermudez. I'm glad to have you on the show. How you doing, bro?
Doing well, Reggie. What's going on, man?
Man, life is good. I can't complain right now. And if I could, I don't know if it would change much. But
fair enough.
But man, I'm excited to have this conversation with you because I think we have a lot of similarities in our stories, come from very different backgrounds, but a lot of similarities. And the conversations that we've had since we've reconnected in these recent years have been just to the theme, like embracing vulnerability to its core, deep, a lot of tears, a lot of hugs, a lot of all that. And so I'm just excited for the world to hear it.
Thank you. Same, man. Same.
Yeah, man. So give me one. Where are you? What excites you? What's a passion of yours right now in life? What gets you going today?
A lot, going back to when we reconnected, right? And before I answer that question, I guess for me, it might be important to understand like why I even decided to reconnect, right? Which is now part of, I guess, my overall sense of being, right? And for me at the time when I reached out to you was right shortly actually, and I might get off camera here for a little bit. No, I'm still on camera. But obviously, this is the reason why I reached out to you.
Hey, yeah,
this is not a
good book, right?
Paid advertisement, by the way. But,
yeah, if you're not watching, you can see he's holding up a copy of Perseverance Through Severe Dysfunction.
Yeah, I'll do it again. I'll do it again.
Oh yeah,
definitely. And I got the hard book.
Oh yeah.
So for me, when I knew that was going on in your life, and at the time I just read a quick little excerpt from the book. And it just immediately went light bulb. For me, what it did, it obviously, and if I remember that moment correctly, I got goosebumps because I realized how out of touch we were with ourselves when I guess we needed each other the most, right? Like, and so for me, when you decided to, take your experience and put it in a book, it showed a lot of leadership, a lot of courage, a lot of those things that in my mind I was going, wow, why did he do it and why didn't I do it, right? And so it was the first time that I ever felt a sense of jealousy, but a healthy sense of jealousy, and so for me, that was, I think, like I always tell you, like you pretty much sparked that light that was out for me. It was, and visually, it always looked like my candle was out. Saw yours, and I just said, "Hey, can you help me?" And the moment you touched, it lit a little bit. Ever since then, for me, what excites me, it's giving back, and when I say giving back, it doesn't necessarily mean financially. It doesn't necessarily mean like constantly, being a cheerleader for people. Just means giving back whatever you're able to give, even if it's a little bit of yourself. And so for me, that's what I decided to do ever since then. And so for those of you that don't know anything about me, at that time I was handling um, a lot of external pressures that were truly out of my control, right? And at the time, and I guess we can dive deeper into this whenever you want to, or however you want to lead the conversation. But for me, everything went to absolute shit in 2016. But at the same time, um, I finally found a purpose, a why. And in 2016, and you know this, but for those of you that don't, I unexpectedly had a child. He's now 7 years old, Gabriel, and he's, and you know me better than most. He's my best friend. He's everything, and he's my and for me, it was just a matter of realizing, okay, like Reggie is a good example of somebody that has faced a lot of adversity, but you didn't let it define you. Um, you didn't allow yourself to conform to everything else that everybody else was doing, pretty much, right? And which, when I say what everybody else was doing, was, everybody has their past, everybody has their trauma, but we both know that there are certain men out there, and not just men, but women included, that do not have good coping mechanisms with what happened, and they think that it's a matter of, like, it's okay, life happens, shit happens, and although that may be true, like we know that if the damage was very, very deep, it's not as easy as just going, it's okay, time will heal, because time alone won't do a lot of things. Now, time will just be time, but in that time, you have to be able to do something, right?
Yeah,
And so,
and time when you are not addressing things can grow into something even worse. It can fester
exactly,
and
exactly.
compound and be even worse.
Exactly. And it festers, man. It just definitely festers. And so for me, and you've known this throughout ever since we were connected, you've known that there are things, there's a certain quality about myself that I know that if I let things fester, it just gets out of control. And for me, what it does, it just consumes me internally, and then I just shut down. And then when it goes back to that whole giving. And so when you start to shut down, there's nothing that you can give possibly, and it doesn't mean that you're a bad person, but you're honestly you're depriving yourself, you're depriving other people of what you can offer. And I think where a lot of people miss that very basic concept, and then they just think, well, it's probably too late for me even to start anywhere because I have, all these years of trauma that I can't really do anything about, so might as well just keep living what I'm doing. So for me, yeah, I hope that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think like I'm so glad that you started off talking about giving
Mhm.
because I literally this past weekend went to a TEDx event here in Nashville, and I would say probably 3 or 4 of the speakers got up there and said some form of, "When you give, it comes back in multitude." Like, giving is the way that we all are supposed to be, and, like, your service to this world is it's incredible, and, like, what are some of those things that you do? Because I mean, like, you're constantly seeking opportunities to give back. What are some of the things that you do to give back?
I remember, if we can go back in time just a little bit, I remember right after you and I connected, you started to plug me in with CIS, right? Communities and schools. And so for me, that was extremely rewarding right away. But I must say that when you're dealing with your own mental health needs and issues, you also have to be very clear minded in the sense that you have to make sure that before you even accept somebody else's problems, right? And that's usually what ends up happening before you even put yourself in that scenario, that you have to be in a good place emotionally, right? More than anything, because it's not something that I think honestly people uh, need to take lightly at all, right? Because again, when you start dealing with your own stuff first, it can be incredibly taxing on your body, on your health, right? Legit. And when I started to become more involved with CIS, I started to realize, whoa, like I think I may be way in over my head to some degree, right? And I can go back and identify one particular moment, and I think I did share it with you. You know, I was actually part of CIS, but they realized CIS ended up telling somebody in the school. I guess I can't talk for privacy reasons, the school, but I remember they said, "Hey, we have somebody visiting from CIS, and he can translate." Turns out, within 2 minutes, bro, I got involved in basically de-escalating a suicide attempt with a 10-year-old girl. And for somebody that, personally myself was already handling a lot of dark thoughts, especially around those times. I mean, it's just a matter of like, what do you
Triggering,
do?
I'm sure.
Right. And not only is it triggering, but you also have, I always believe that no matter how bad of a person you think you are, if you see somebody in absolute need like that, like I did that day with that little girl, like you cannot help but to just be okay. Like even if I get it wrong, I need to do something about it, right? But unfortunately, getting it wrong with somebody that is needing mental health needs, that could essentially be a terrible situation.
Right. Life or death.
So,
Seriously.
so the only thing I could do at the time is just try to de-escalate as much as I could, just by translating and just by giving her peace until somebody got there that is, trained and able to actually give them the right medical help, right? And so, but for me, that was a growing and learning experience, just from the side of, okay, like, because for one, I think you do two things if you ever get a chance to do that for somebody. For one, obviously you get to put somebody else's needs first right away, right? And obviously, and it's very, very hard, right? It's very, very difficult because I always think about we always see homeless people out on the road, and but guess what? Like sometimes we just decide to move on and drive through, right? But this was just very different, and I generally don't think that anybody would just be like, look the other way and turn and speak, I'm sorry, I'm busy. I could have easily done that, right? I'm so sorry, I'm busy. I got a meeting to go to. But that moment changed that entire girl's course of life, right? And it did mine as well, because it was the first time that I remember. Fast forward to about a week later, the teacher that pulled me aside saw me again go back in for CIS, and she goes, "I just need you to know that that little girl is in a better place because of what you did." And then genuinely, I felt like I did nothing. I felt like because all I did was I just translated and I just basically held on to her until somebody came in and said, "Okay, we need to get you something like the right amount of help, the adequate help."
That is so beautiful, man. Like, because like you said, like you could have easily declined that offer. Like that,
Right,
that was heavy for the things that you were dealing with at the time, and you weren't professionally trained in doing that, but you stepped up to the challenge. And for that girl, right, you were an angel that day. And I think that's a beautiful thing to
and
for
vice
people to
versa. You
recognize.
know,
And that's the part, right? Like when you give, it comes back in multitude. Like
right,
you gave your heart that day, and she didn't know it, and she probably won't ever realize what she did for you.
right,
And that's so huge. And I heard this story. It was a man in San Francisco,
right.
and he was walking down to the Golden Gate Bridge, and very upset. He's just walking, and he later jumped off the bridge, and his family is scrambling, trying to figure out what happened, what was going on, if he had left any clues or anything like that. So they go to his house and they find a note.
Well,
And the note, it says, "I am not in a great place. I'm very upset. Uh, I want to take my own life. And I'm going to go and jump off the Golden Gate Bridge." But on my way to that bridge, if at least one person just smiles at me, I won't do it.
Hmm.
And we know that he jumped.
Yeah.
And it's like you never realize your impact on somebody else's life. Like every moment, every time at the grocery store, at the gas station, no matter
Yeah.
what you're doing, like you have an opportunity to provide a positive influence, a positive perspective on somebody's life. And like you just don't know. So, like you
Sure.
showing up and doing that, like you saved her life and she saved your life at the
Yeah.
same time. And so like, man, I think that's so beautiful. And another thing to point out is like you're a Hispanic or you're a Spanish speaking person
Right.
who could relate on that level, right? If we get
Absolutely.
there and like mental health doesn't discriminate if you speak one language, if you have one color, if you don't, like whatever it is, like it's always going to exist. But for you to be able to be there and to give her a voice and to be a voice for her
Right.
was huge, man. Like, so I just want to give that some space because that,
Yeah,
I mean,
man.
like, that's not light. That's not light at all.
I appreciate that, man. And for me, when I was still now, unfortunately, obviously, the girl had a lot of needs that I honestly the school wasn't even able to handle properly long term. So they found her a different place, and I do believe that she relocated over into another state, like far away, East Coast, West Coast, sorry. And for me, what that did though was it opened up a side of my heart that I knew I had shut down. And I'm gonna go back to the point because you said I could relate to her, and that was the specific reason why I was actually even brought to CIS in the first place. Before I even got to know her, I got to know three children in particular. All had terrible backgrounds, pretty much, of abuse, both physical, mental, emotional, and they all recently immigrated from remember, El Salvador and Guatemala. And for me to obviously, they knew that I had a similar upbringing. Obviously, being I was born and raised in Quito, Ecuador, and when I came here to the United States, I didn't know any English whatsoever. My English actually got a decent by the time I went to middle school, but even then, I remember like grammatically and like structuring the sentences and all that was still a big problem for me. But at least I was able to understand exactly how their assimilation into the country uh, was just pretty much a big obstacle for them, because and you know this obviously. I always think that I'm a very unique, and I don't use unique in a way of like special. I always consider
But
myself
you
to be
are.
at the time, no, but
Okay.
and this is I'm talking about like how I perceive myself in the
Yeah, I
time.
got you.
And so when I was here, I knew that I was different because I knew that I was Latino, but I was the only Latino, and at the time I was at Walter Stokes Middle School, which was now is an extended parking lot of Lipscomb's campus. And so for me, just I've always known that I looked different. I stuck out like a sore thumb. And then shortly afterwards, obviously, I began at MBA, Montgomery Bill Academy, which is here locally. And for me, that cultural transition assimilation was an absolute challenge, because I came here I didn't come here when I was like two. I didn't come here when I was like 3 or 4. I came here when I was closer to about 10. And so most of the fondest memories that I have of my childhood are actually in Ecuador, and it's interesting too because I think you and I talked about this in one of our coffees, how even though obviously those memories were in the first 10 years of my life, I if I can close my eyes, I can still pick up smells, visuals, certain feelings of different environments, right? But for some reason, where obviously you would think that I would remember the most, which is the times at NBA, I blocked a lot of that out, and that includes a lot of the positive experiences, right? Because I would remember, I'll give you an example. I ended up reconnecting here with Benton Harvey, who is now my dog's doctor. He works for Banfield, and so of all places. And he told me something recently when I was just dropping Samson off. He said, "Do you remember that one time?" I
Nothing.
just nodded, but
Nothing.
I genuinely was like, I do not remember that at all, right? But
Yeah.
for him, it was a good moment. It was a good
Right.
experience. Not to
I
that,
have that. I have that happen to me so often
Right,
where like whether it be a football memory, or just like just we were out and having a good time, like friends will start talking about things and I don't remember any of it. And it's
right,
crazy, right? Because people think I wrote a memoir and it's pretty long book with a lot of different memories, but those are significant memories that just like are always implanted in my brain that I can pull from. But like when it comes to the casual Friday night, what did we do? And it ended up being a great big deal for people. Like
yeah,
I really cannot pull those memories. And I like even recent ones. And but I think that talks about the trauma,
yeah,
right? Because
absolutely,
during trauma, you suppress a lot of that stuff in order to survive, right?
sure,
And so like even and it's not like you can just suppress the bad stuff, like you said, it's the bad and the good. And so
oh yeah,
like you end up with these blocks of your life that you truly can't remember.
sure,
And but man, you touched on a lot of stuff like from growing up 10 years in Ecuador and then you come to the United States of America. Did you come to Nashville first?
yeah, directly, yeah, and
Okay.
at the time too, exact location. I remember my uncle had an entire upstairs available for us, and but it was right there next to Lipscomb, Belmont's campus, and so
Did you come
again,
alone?
no,
Or
it was just me and my mom. Like my mom and my excuse me, my mom and I came, and my dad, by the way, was here pretty much for the first, like I guess, 20 years before that, right? So again, and this goes back to the theme too of and it's interesting because you and I talk about this particular topic about my having a father, right? Like it's not like I have a story of saying I never met my father. My father was an asshole, you know. My father was around. He was our primary provider, but he did it from afar, you know. And trust me when I say this, and because I'm hearing a lot of these themes now, especially in like mental health podcasts that I follow. A lot of men now that are fathers who grew up without a father, in the sense of not seeing their father, not having access to their father, right? Pretty much react as if they didn't have a father, you know. And for me, that was something that was very, very hard for people to understand at the time when I was actually asking for help. And again, it's just interesting because now all of these feelings that I thought were almost like baseless and silly, obviously at the time because I was little, are now coming forward as in like, hey, like there's a reason why you are the way you are right now, and it is because of all those feelings that you felt. And so yeah, man. So yeah, the father thing has always been a thing.
yeah, man, I think so much overlap in that, right? So like my dad, he was in Nashville, like, but I rarely saw him growing up.
Right.
And then he went to prison. And so that was a huge strain in our relationship and then like being a child. I think I don't even want to say specifically a boy because I think boys and girls experience different things in a longing
Oh,
for their
absolutely.
father, but being a boy who's named after my dad and wanting to see him and be all around, like that hurt. And that started to create all types of behavior, starts to create
Sure.
these thoughts, all kind of stuff. And I had a talk not too long ago with a group of dads of color at a school that I spoke at. And I just like found these stats of like, how important fathers are. And I want to run through those a couple like real quick.
Yep.
So this is like how important it is in terms of education. So children with actively involved fathers are 43% more likely to earn A's in school,
Yep.
2 times as likely to enter college or find stable employment after high school, and 33% less likely to repeat a grade. So that's for education. In terms of well-being and other aspects of life, 75% less likely to have a teen birth, a half as likely to experience multiple depressive symptoms, and
Hmm.
80% less likely to spend time in jail. And then I found some even deeper stats, and these stats come from the Fatherhood Project. Um, this one was like just absolutely blew my mind. Fatherless children, um, of course, there's stats about unemployment, low income, being on social assistance, life expectancy and lifespan decreased, but 100 times higher risk of experiencing fatal abuse. 100 times greater risk.
Yeah.
And like digging deeper into that stats, like How is that? It is the frustrated, stressed out, under-resourced, under-supported single mother
Sure.
being driven insane
Sure.
and abusing their children to a point of death.
Yeah.
And that, like, the two-parent household is so crucial. And you hear like a bunch where like sometimes you'll see like this the stats and the outcomes for single dads very mimicking that of two-parent households. But I think both play such a huge role. Like you can't
Absolutely.
have one without the other. And so with the way that your relationship was with your father, how has that influenced your parenting style with Gabriel?
Where do I begin? So, I guess I could answer that with the positive and the negative, right? Because the negative of it was directly to me, right? That was the negative that I think that relationship caused. Because when you know you have a father that's just a provider, right? You just identify that person as your biological father, who yet you're thankful that that person is taking care of you, right? But I also know, and this is based off of a lot of, I can't quote any statistics right now, but I do know that when you don't have a father physically present, and you have that direct access, you start to question pretty much everything that you do as a person. I believe it gets that feeling gets amplified, at least for me personally, like times a million, especially when all of a sudden you start to realize that that father that you lacked will essentially be your end all be all, if in case you ever decide to be a father. And one of the things that I have started thinking about more is that even if men, because I'm sure you know a lot of men, you know a lot of women that go, I will never have a kid and I will never be put in that position again because of what happened to me in the past, right?
Yeah.
Because of my
I
parents.
think right now I'm probably one of those people.
Right, right. But I also started thinking, and this is just based on discussions, I'm also starting, and just this is new to me as well, but I decided to recently start coaching soccer. At the end of the day, even if I was not a father, you still have to be able to have qualities, I would say, certain characteristics that are father like, or at least parent like, in order to be able to coach somebody, right? So at the end of the day, I don't think that it matters. Out of the, like this whole outlook of like I will never be again, I will never be put in that position, blah blah blah. Sure, yeah, that might not be a thing. That might not be your path. That might not be your goal. That might not be in your radar. But at the end of the day, I do believe that you still have to be able to make peace with what's happening, so that you could be a better leader. Because honestly, like leader, let's say I'm thinking of I won't put any names out there. I'm thinking of about 5 people right now off the top of my head that are in incredible like leadership positions, and I know that they're currently also struggling with a lot of the things that happened to them in their childhood. And also, something to note is that these people basically consider their positions or their companies that they created their babies. And so that's, I guess, the way that I'm trying to tie it in with, okay, if you don't want to have children genetically, if you're imperfect, but you do know that there are people who will basically adopt whatever they create, whether it's a business. I mean, people go crazy over dogs, right? They treat them like children. I'm seeing a lot of people that, again, if you don't decide or think that it's parenting is your calling, that's fine. And I completely support everyone's, I guess, viewpoint in that, because again, it's coming from somebody that never planned to be a father either, right? And but at the same time, I decided to take responsibility, and that's the biggest thing that I'm seeing, I guess. And that might be like the biggest takeaway from this particular bit in our chat here, that a lot of people, they just lack responsibility, and or not willing to accept responsibility. And I do believe that we're living in a world where people are just making easier decisions, right? Like shortcuts. It's always about shortcuts. And so for me, thankfully, that's one thing that I do remember when I came here to the United States. Having shortcuts, that was not an option for me whatsoever. There was no way that I could shortcut learning English. There was no way that I could shortcut learning how to assimilate. So for me, it's, I guess, thankfully, that's like the positive that I decided to extract out of my trauma, right? And that's what I think a lot of people lack. They just view trauma as then like, oh, it's just something terrible that happened to me. There's nothing that could possibly be, good out of it, and therefore it is what it is. And so I'll just move on. I will continue to conform to society's, perception of what I should be going through. And again, I feel like a lot of people, or I see a lot of people not challenging what they see or what they experience. They just take it as an and I see it, man. I see it so often here, especially with other Latinos that I see here trying to make their lives better. And then all of a sudden somebody stands in their way, and then they go,
Yeah.
well, okay,
Right.
and then that's it. And so yeah, it's brutal.
I think it's something that, like, I would try not to pass any judgment on it, because one, we can't respond to, or we can't always choose how we respond to our trauma.
Right.
And, whereas, some resilience is built in some, it can literally alter somebody else's brain to a point where they feel like they are constantly trapped in that. And if it's a trauma where they are the, victim, and had to be in a submissive state for a really long time, then that may have just been the identity that they have assumed. And it
Sure.
takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of resources to come up out of that. I think that was one of the things, like you mentioned it earlier, just about my story, but that was one of the things when I wrote PTSD, right? Having PTSD and complex trauma, I was like, man,
Sure.
I can't have this be the defining mark of me, because my PTSD showed up in a lot of different ways. I think people always
Right.
think flashbacks. Like, that's the first thing that people's minds go to when you mention PTSD. But when you look at interpersonal trauma and complex trauma over prolonged periods of time, it's like it's the one word that I heard you say
Sure.
that brought me back to a different place, and I feel slighted, and so I never talk to you ever again because you said one word, type of thing. It's isolating myself from a community of people who are trying to support
Mm.
me, which is
Yeah.
self-sabotaging behavior. And now I'm in a position, and so like we don't get to choose how that is, but I didn't want it to be defined only by the trauma. And that's why the first word in,
Right.
when I redid the acronym, it was perseverance, because that was all about overcoming. Perseverance, all about overcoming those things. Can you talk about, I mean, you've alluded to some of the childhood trauma, and I mean, whether it be in
Sure.
Ecuador or just in the transition from Ecuador to Nashville in the US.
Yeah.
And then even after that, some of those childhood things that, if you're willing to share those, that affected and maybe still affect you to this day.
It's a great question, actually. I had to talk to somebody recently about it that's struggling now. The kid's about, what, 12 now, but he's basically going through the same thing that I'm about to talk to you about right now. And that transition from being in Ecuador to being here, I never saw it as a transition. I remember I always felt like I was taken away, right? Borderline close to like what kidnapping feels like, right? And I'm not saying it as in like, whoa, I'm making it up. It's actually a thing. And recently, I sought therapy actually through one of your connections, and he basically said that was a real thing. So people essentially, fast forward to like now, I react to stress as if I'm physically attacked, and it all stems from that one defining moment that happened in my childhood. Because, and I guess for anybody watching right now, the way that my mind interpreted that was this: I always knew that I was going to go back to Ecuador at some point, because I started coming here, I remember, since I was like maybe 6 or 7 years old, visiting at the very least with the summers, even if it was for like a week, I think. And but I always knew that it was just a matter of visiting this person that was my father, right? But I always knew, and I distinctly always remember wanting to go back home, right? Because that's all I ever knew. And then the day that summer, and one particular day, when I asked when are we going back, the answer was we're not going to go back. And so imagine, play that here, right? Play that out as if like you're living here in Franklin downtown, right? And then all of a sudden you go back, you go to school, and then somebody stops you at school, and then they go, you can't go back home. And you go, well, why not? You just can't. You have to go that way now. What do you make of that? You
Damn.
know?
And as a child, especially if the communication isn't there, you're starting to
Correct.
internalize all of these
Correct.
negative things,
Correct.
either about yourself or about the situation. Oh my
Correct.
goodness. What's up, Vulnerability Muscle fam? We've got an amazing sponsor to talk about today. And it's a product that has truly made a difference in my life. Call Me Go. Now, I only bring products that I believe in, and this is one that has been a game changer for me. Whenever I feel stressed, whenever I feel like things are just piling up and the anxiety is really cranking up, I turn to my Call Me Go device. This is it right here. This thing is literally a game changer, and I was skeptical about it at first, but what makes this thing stand out? It combines 3 scientifically proven methods to reducing anxiety. First, there's a grounding technique, multi-sensory stimulation that really helps you stay present. So you have the feel of it, there's a vibration factor, there's lights, there's also smell. Then there's that scented element, tapping into the power of aromatherapy. But here's the kicker, and what really sets Call Me Go apart is personalized breathing regulation. It's like having your own breathing coach in your pocket, in your hand. And so I use this when I'm gearing up for podcasts, when I'm starting my day, when I'm calming down and chilling out at the end of my day. It has been an absolute game changer. I love Call Me Go because it's not a one size fit all solution. It's tailored to me, my body, my unique stress triggers. The impact it has on my daily life is undeniable. Now, I want you to experience the calm that Call Me Go can bring to your life. Head over to callmego.com and use the code REGGIE444 at checkout for a fantastic $30 off. Trust me, this is an investment in your well-being that you won't regret. Visit callmego.com, use the code REGGIE444 at checkout, and let Call Me Go help you find calm in the storm.
And so for me now, and again, it's just one of those things that because it was never addressed, and when it goes back, and you said something very important, it goes back to communication. My parents were absolutely, again, respect them, but they were just not into communicating, at least not to me, because I do remember, over the years, I've gotten to know other similar stories, backgrounds, but I've asked them, did your parents include you in that decision making, or was it just kind of like, boom, you woke up next day and you're no longer going back? She goes, no, no, no. Like I knew what was happening. There was a plan in place. So again, for me, it was this constant, just having to constantly adapt, and because I did not have another option. Again, it was either sink or swim. It was genuinely, it was like survival of the fittest, right? For me, constantly. And at the time, it was weird because obviously now I look at it like that, but back then I just saw myself as a weak person. I lacked obviously the one thing that I needed in order to be able to have friends, the English language. My parents also put me in an environment. I just told you, Belmont at the time, Belmont in the late '90s. There were how many Latinos you think lived in Belmont? How many Latinos you think they live now? Like
Right.
zero.
Yeah.
And so again, it was just like the closest thing I remember I read is like, you take a lion right now, full grown male lion out of the jungle, you put him in the zoo. What do you think is gonna happen? you know and it's not the whole I'm gonna coward. It's that dude is gonna go crazy. That dude is gonna be aggressive, probably won't be able to socialize because it's a new environment. That's essentially what happened to me.
I'm glad you bring that up because I think that's a great metaphor because
Yeah.
you take, cherry picked out of the hood, into a school like Montgomery Bell Academy.
Yeah.
I don't know your transition into the school, but coming from a totally different background and going to a place like that. And what you said was like, it's perceived as aggressive. It's perceived as, this violent tiger or lion
Sure.
coming in and being disruptive. But in actuality, like that lion only knows one way. That lion, that's survival for that lion. It sees you
Yeah.
coming with these metal rods and these ropes and these this, like it's trying to survive. It's not being
Yeah.
aggressive. It's literally living its life, and it's having to learn and be reprogrammed into a whole nother way that isn't natural for them.
Correct.
So talk about that transition. So you got here and at 10 years old, and then a couple years later you're starting, was it what grade? 7th, 8th grade at Montgomery Bell? Ninth grade
I
even?
started at seventh. I started at
7th.
seventh.
Okay. So at 13, 14 years old,
Yeah.
you just learning English.
Yeah. Like sixth grade, I was like barely passing grammar. Like
Oh my God.
so.
And oh my gosh, man. Like talk about that. So for those who
But
don't know, Montgomery Bell Academy is high school that I went to. Dennis also attended a few years ahead of me. And um, predominantly white, a wealthy population, and just a world that is full of privilege and opportunity. But again, I think if you listen to some of the stories that have been told already, different than the worlds that we grew
Sure,
up in. So,
sure.
Dennis, what was that like?
Well, for starters, it was an automatic bullying fiasco. Because right off the bat, obviously, my skin color, I still had. I remember, and people to this day still think that I have a little bit of an accent somewhere, and I don't know. I'd never pick it up on my own, and thankfully, at least that is an insecurity that I've gotten over. But I do remember back then. I mean, there was an accident, and obviously, my ability to read, comprehend, it was, it was just, I mean, why try pretty much at that point in time? So for me, it was that, and essentially, I also had to battle I would say the blunt racism that came with it. Oh, what you wetback, you just crossed the border last night. That's why you're here, and so and what's interesting is that when I hear that now, then it didn't hurt, right? Because all I knew was like, why are you being mean to me? Like I did nothing wrong to you, but then you just kind of, and not kind of, essentially what I ended up having to do, because, and unfortunately you pretty much described MBA to the T, right? But one of the other sides of MBA is that because there's a lot of power, there's a lot of affluent families there. If your name isn't in one of those buildings, essentially you have to just be quiet, and that's if you're part of the community already. So imagine me at the time, also Reggie, I completely forgot, which is very important. And I did want to talk to you about this one. I didn't have papers then. Like I was just here as a resident, right? So one of the things that I do remember, and this was something that I
Can you
made
can
a
you
note of.
can you can you can you because I want people to understand what that means. You didn't have papers yet, because I think there's
So yeah,
misconception around.
so essentially, at the time, I guess just based on government rules, I was technically an alien, right? But I was in the process of getting papers,
Okay,
and
did you have
so
a visa at that time, or is that
yes,
how it
yes.
works? Okay,
I was a resident because of my father.
okay,
And I remember right around that time, he had just started the paperwork to become a naturalized citizen.
okay,
But that alone takes like, well, then it was a lot easier, obviously, because of we didn't have this was before 9/11. This was before, okay. So it was a lot easier to become a citizen then. But still, like I remember I became a citizen by the time, I think I was it might have been late eighth grade or early ninth grade. I can't really remember. But keep in mind, seventh and eighth grade, I still had to face for those 2 years a lot of discrimination. And obviously, when you tell, just so you know, it's not like I just received that and I said, doesn't matter. I got angry, right? I was, and that kept on festering over and over and over again. But unfortunately, the one thing that what as a young boy, what is your natural instinct? All you want to do is just punch somebody, right?
right, right,
To let them know, don't do that again.
right.
And I
Go
also
back to
came
that
from
lion in
yeah,
the zoo.
and I also came from a background in Ecuador of nothing. I mean, when I came to MBA, I went from, and this is something that I share openly now, but our daughter's bed now is worth more than the house that I grew up in, you know? And so for me to go from that to that, to where you saw, Ferraris pull up, kids getting dropped off, I didn't know what to make of it. It wasn't that I was overwhelmed with it. It wasn't that I was like jealous. I was just like, this
Where
is,
am I?
I didn't even see him. I didn't even see that in movies. Why? Because I don't think I had a TV until I came to the United States. you know, I was a lie. I take that back. We had a little crappy TV. It was like this big, and it was one of those they had to like turn
The
the
turn
turn the things
knobs, yeah.
and mess with the antenna to make sure you got the
Oh
right.
yeah.
So, but so going back to the NBA part, at one point when I realized, well, I can't do anything about it. I can't do anything about it physically, and more than anything, I couldn't do anything about it physically, because if something happened to me, and let's say any one of those families, right, decided to take legal action, I could potentially put my parents at stake,
Wow.
man.
Wow, that's a
So,
lot of pressure.
and essentially, I walked around NBA for the longest time like this, actually like that, more than anything, behind my back. And so, you know, it was one of the closest things where I just felt like I did not have any option other than to just say yes or no, ma'am, every single day. even if I was in the right, you know. And I can think of one example. I don't want to go into details of an honor council situation where this kid that just happened to be white lied about me cheating in front of the math teacher. Like I'm talking about 2 yards away, maybe. Said that I cheated the whole time that I pulled out a calculator, and it was only because I got a 98 and he got a 90, and he was supposed to be the best in the class. So, and I can go off on other examples, but even that alone, I decided to basically adapt to how I did in certain grades, right? In certain classes. I would purposely go, I'm going to get this one wrong, I'm going
Self-sabotage.
to get this one wrong. I self-sabotage, man, a lot, a
It's real.
lot, a lot, a lot.
It's
I even
real.
self-sabotaged in Latin.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is somebody that speaks Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
As a root language in the Spanish, I had to self-sabotage Latin just so that somebody else wouldn't give me shit anymore. So essentially, I didn't have confidence. I lacked a lot of these things that, and I'm going to go back, I guess, for it to make sense. You asked me, like, what's the difference between, like, how your father raised you and how Gabriel raised, and how your Gabriel raised. Basically, I'm doing the complete opposite. I'm making sure that boy wakes up every day, tells himself, I'm confident, I'm smart, I'm kind. Be- because when you don't have that, you're broken. And so essentially, I realized that up until I reached out to you, man, and saw this, I can confidently say that this saved me for that day. That this one, at least, um, it gave me a bigger sense of hope for myself, for Gabriel, and because again, man, when you grow up without any guide and any proper examples as a man, shit. And on top of that, you are a minority. Like, life can be real fucking cruel, man.
Yeah,
It can be
bro.
real cruel. So,
Yeah, bro. Yeah,
yeah,
I find so much inspiration and hope in the way that you've responded. I mean, I know every day is not sunshines, but the way that you've responded for yourself personally and doing the work, and how you're raising Gabriel, like that was just beautiful, man. Just to feed his head with all the positive things that we didn't get told, right? We didn't
yeah,
have someone like and bad things are going to happen to children, right? Something
yeah,
awful is going to happen. We as adults are going to do something bad to a child, but to step in and notice when that happens and says that's not the truth and here is the truth, and to
sure,
reaffirm that message, that breaks some of those trauma links. Like that stops that trauma from sitting in there, letting that internalize and then becoming whatever it becomes later on down the line. And
sure.
so, like, dude, I am so proud of you. I'm proud of the man that you are. I'm proud of the dad that you are.
Thank
Like,
you, bro.
like, dude, like you have no idea, man. And um I wanna touch on something because I mean, like, so we let's fast forward a little bit. So you are how old again?
34.
34 years old, um, done some work, had two children,
Mhm.
and how has your relationship with your father evolved, or your mother, or whomever was responsible for raising you during those early years? How has that evolved?
Unfortunately, it has gotten to a point where they have finally understood that everything that they did for me wasn't what they thought it was going to be, right? So essentially, they had this goal, right, for me, and on paper, it checked out, right? Like they sent me to where they thought I was going to succeed, MBA, right? From there, Vanderbilt, right? So on the surface, everything looks great. We're like, whoa, holy, right? You tell that to anybody, they're like, wow,
Right.
you must have had great parents.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I up until a certain point, I absolutely hated when people said that. Oh, you must be so lucky to have good parents that that provided that, right? And because all I would do is I would just nod, and in the back of my mind, I would go, "You have no idea what I had to put up with just so that they could have a smile on their face and say that their kid went to MBA, or then graduated to, he's going to go to Vanderbilt, especially after I graduated." Because essentially I ended up realizing, and it took me I was 24. I remember when I went. I actually didn't do anything for myself. Like since I came to this country, I've pretty much done everything everybody else wanted me to do. Right. I went to MBA, got it, right? And even then, it wasn't good enough, right? Because, I hope this answers your question, because when I was at MBA, I was always compared to other people
By
especially
your
by my
parent,
father.
by your
By my
family.
father, I was
Okay.
especially, I remember. And that was interesting because obviously, keep in mind, like when I came here, I knew that he was my father, right? My biological father. But here was somebody that had no, I would say he came from a place where he could not possibly relate to what I was going through, right? Because he was born and raised in Ecuador, and he came here out of desperation to provide, and he just came here to work. It's not like came here to get educated. It's not like he got here to be acclimated. He just came here to work, like a lot of Hispanics do. But also, a lot of Hispanics don't go, "Hey, we just crossed the border. Let me send my kid to MBA." Also, that's not a thing, right? And I'll be honest with you, and because I'm sure a lot of people are probably wondering, how the hell did he end up there in the first place?
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, my dad thankfully had a great connection at the time. One of his clients just so happens, and I won't put the
What
name
did he
out
do?
there. He sponsored me.
No, what did your dad do? You said clients.
At the time he had a property management gig, and he serviced a lot of the neighborhoods there in Belmead. And one of the clients in particular, I guess grew fond of his story and obviously the immigration. And so that was the good thing, right? Obviously, because it's hard to find affluent families that all of a sudden go, "Shit, my heart goes out to you. What can I do to help?" Right? And so all he said, it would be great for my son not to go to any of these schools, pretty much. And the only options that I had were pretty much the ESL schools. And for those of you that don't know, ESL schools back in the 90s were pretty much
English
were
as a
like
second language is
yeah.
what that stands for.
And they
Okay.
were located in Section 8 projects back then, right? When like there was no Nissan Stadium then. It was there, right? So again, so for me that was my way in. But like my way in was honestly, had somebody told me that my way in was essentially my demise as a child, because essentially I had to develop this other I don't want to call it an alter ego, but essentially I had to develop a personality to keep Dennis, immigrant Ecuador Dennis, from being hurt, right? Every day. I had to pretend that I liked shit that I never. Ask me if I liked to golf the first time I golfed. Hell no. Ask me if I liked tennis the first time I played tennis. No. But you know that those things are like pretty much prerequisites to be there, and at least to be accepted in some shape or form. So yeah, man. So now because of that and their lack of understanding, then my relationship with my parents unfortunately has developed into one that is just very basic, I would call it. We talk when we need to talk, and it's mostly just because of the respect that I do know that they're owed, right, for their sacrifices. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to be, I mean, I don't want to feel like I'm ungrateful, because obviously without their sacrifices that did put me in MBA, that did essentially then take me to Vanderbilt. Honestly, that opens doors, and let's be realistic. I mean, that does play, that does have a certain weight in life, that a lot of people legitimately I mean, I can think of like three of my classmates whose parents at MBA I'm talking about, whose parents pretty much sold their other two houses or took out mortgages just so that they can continue to finish at MBA. You know, and then obviously I'm sure you remember this, at Vandy stories got worse, like as far as like why people were truly there, and that even changed because obviously for the first time I remember I started realizing like, oh, the women's perspective on it is just very, very different. It's almost like I'm just here to hopefully get a husband, and that's it. So it's like, and I say all that, and there is a point to that, because
For some
essentially,
women, not all.
no, not all. No, no, no.
Yeah.
But I mean, I remember I lived in Kassam, right? And then this goes back to Kassam. In Kassam, I mean, it seemed like the first floor, which is obviously code, it was the first floor was women, men, women, men. First floor was generally just the floor, and that normal floor is like Mrs. floor. because like every single girl out there was every weekend was just trying to figure out like who they can date, who could, and essentially they also had plans, agendas. It would seem like, right, where they would know, such name, such last name was affiliated now with it, and they would specifically go and try to figure out how they could get in. And not only with men, right? I know that women particularly, whenever they got to pick roommates, right, they particularly pick roommates if possible that whose dad was the CEO of whatever company. That was an actual methodology, right? And so, I say all that as to how it relates to me, because that's essentially what I got to see from the very beginning at MBA, right? Because that's usually how I ended up seeing relationships being formulated. The who wanted to get to know the who's who behind such companies, so that essentially, and this, if you became good buddies with such and such family, then essentially you have a job on your way out of MBA, you know and it's just a good net. And I get it, man, I get it. That's it. I at heart now I've come to peace that obviously it's a great institution, but if you do not have the right support, then the support comes from your family directly, right? And whether you're at MBA, whether you're at Hillsborough, whether you're at Centennial High School, if you don't have that support, man, if you don't have that real understanding from your family of what you're going through, whatever it may be, because again, the mental health crisis that is going on at MBA is not going to be the same one that's going on at Centennial High School. It's just not. But at the end of the day, it just boils down to one thing, and it's how you develop your relationships inside of your immediate nucleus, right? And that to me was never a thing. I didn't have a nucleus, Yeah.
Wow, man. I, wow.
Yeah.
Just like I want to clarify, like when you were bringing up, talking about women, you were saying it was similar to NBA, which is an all boys school, and
Right,
how they
right, right.
network and how they are strategic about building those relationships. Cause
Sure.
I love my women and I don't want them to feel like they were
No, no, no,
singled
yeah.
out in
Glad you
that.
clarified
Yeah. Yeah.
before I
No,
get
no.
canceled, before I even get a chance to get canceled.
Oh man. I got to touch on this because I think it speaks to something deeper, and I don't know if you've tapped into it or not, or if you care to comment. But
Sure.
you are, I can see a necklace in the video, but you usually
Yeah.
have a nice watch. You probably have some rings and things like that. And it's something you talk to me about, is like the need to wear luxury items and have those things as a way to what? Like why? What is that? How has that developed? And and Black communities, Latino communities, like I
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah.
Where does that come from for you in particular?
For me, I know that it's a culture thing, because obviously, grow up in Ecuador. I mean, everybody, even like poor people, somehow managed to get gold, right? So for me, it's always been part of the Latino culture. Now, I can tell you this: once obviously MBA happened, Vanderbilt happened. I do remember that, because obviously, and I'm sure you remember this. Being part of NBA, you pretty much try to be as low key as possible, right? I mean, it's not like you remember our uniforms, right? It's pretty plain, shirt tucked in, khakis, right? So, so it's not like we grew up in a lavish or luxury environment as far as attire goes, right? But for me, what happened was, I remember when I got out of MBA, and specifically like college time frames, right? I remember I started to internalize a lot of the racism that I faced because of the way I look, my physical looks, right? And at one point, I started to realize that or whenever I perceived or felt like somebody was looking at me, it took me back to MBA, right? And in particular, I remember this one time, right? And I've talked about it with you, but it was, I was coming out of a soccer match, right? It was ninth grade, I think, ninth or 10th grade. And and this happened, by the way, so it was a home game. One of the fans, as I was coming down, and I'm sure you remember the old practice soccer field, right? It was next to the cafeteria, right? So in that little hallway that we had before it went into the big football field. So as I was coming down that hallway, somebody said, "Hey, Mexican." I looked up, and I honestly don't even know why I looked up, honestly, in retrospect, because I'm not Mexican, but I just knew that they couldn't be talking about anybody else, right? So when I look up, next thing I feel is spit
Oh,
right in my face.
fuck.
And what do you do?
Fuck.
Like, what the hell do you do in ninth grade when you realize, one, that's also a full grown adult,
Wow.
all I did was, I remember, because by ninth grade I pretty much had the whole system down, right? Just kind of, tuck your tail between your legs, look down, and keep walking. Pretend like that didn't happen. And so then all I did is, I remember I went into, and you remember the varsity locker rooms. I specifically decided not to go to the varsity locker rooms, obviously, because then I knew that people were going to see me cry. So I went into the junior school locker rooms, and that's where I cried. And when I started to feel, or when I started to see that people were coming in, I went into the athletic room, because at the time I remember, what's his name, Chad Breedlove. And I
Shout
said,
out
"Hey,
to
Chad," I
Chad,
said, "Let
man.
me, can I stay in here for a little bit and just close the door?" He said, "Yeah." And so again, it was the constant, okay, like I cannot let them see me crying. I
Gosh.
cannot let them see that they won, right? Because I knew that always somebody always wanted a reaction out of me. And what happened is, nobody got a reaction out of me then. But unfortunately, because I let that fester through all those years, all these reactions came to what I'm about to tell you now. So when I started to, here like when I was at Vandy, it's coming out of Vandy, I still felt that, right? Anytime somebody would look at me, and they would look at me like this, like they were like, all of a sudden I started to realize, I don't like this feeling. Why are you looking at me? I felt threatened. Again, it goes back to the physical reactions that I would keep having. And then I started doing the tattoos, right? So after, like immediately after that, I remember I came right out of Vandy. I had my first job. First tattoo I had was here, right? And then it just kept on coming up and up and up. And then somebody asked me, like, what's up with the tattoos, right? Like, I don't get it. Like, you went to NBA, you went to Vandy. It's not like we see a lot of those kids like running around with tattoos, right? And at the time, I just said it was cool. It's a way to express myself. I love art, right? I've always lied, and I guess at one point I realized that I lied to myself, because I really did that. The first time I ever got this tattoo is, I told myself this. I sat down in the chair, before I even sat down in the chair, and I told myself, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Right? Like, you have this like internal battle with yourself. Like, are you sure this is permanent? Now, obviously, I could get it removed eventually, but one, it's costly, and it kind of hurts. It hurts more than getting the tattoo itself. But for me, it became a way not only to express my pain that I felt through all those years, but then I finally went, well, now if you actually see me with my shirt off, or even if it's in the summer and I wear cutoffs, now at least I'll give you a reason to look. So at least I can control the narrative and tell myself, oh, you must be looking at my tattoo, right? And then same thing with the chains, right? So then thankfully, I'm in a good place financially where I could at least get nice things. So the chains with the diamonds, the stacked wrists. So for me, it was just a way for other people just to pay attention, to not hear what I've always deemed my, uh, I guess my what's the opposite of a blessing? A curse, right? The curse of being brown, of curse of being able to tan, right? And then it sucks too, bro, because now I know that whoever watches, they're gonna be like, oh man, like that, like, what kind of life is that to live, right? But now I just find the humor, because we live in a world nowadays where, like, people that are naturally like this, right, this color, will go and pay thousands of dollars to be able to look like this, and all I got to do is take my shirt off, lay in the sun for 10 minutes, and I'm
And
like this. So
if you can't see, he pointed
but
at a
yeah,
white piece of paper and then to his skin. So
yeah,
people who are white try to look darker,
pretty
and
much,
yeah, it's a more appealing look
yeah,
apparently.
yeah. And so for me in my mind, I'm just thinking, wow, like, and I'm thinking of, in particular, of of like a couple names right now as I close my eyes, that obviously judge me for my looks, but I know very very well that they tan religiously. So in back of my mind, I'm going, why did you give me all that shit for?
Right. No, that's true. When you
Yeah,
think about it, I mean, like literally, like over time, evolution, right? Some of us were closer to the equator, and some of
yeah,
us were further away. That's it.
yeah,
That's it.
yeah,
And yet, it leads to so many different things in life. I got one last question before I
yeah.
jump into a little thing I do. But what is a piece of advice that you would give to young Dennis that he didn't receive? And then second part to that is,
Okay.
what is a piece of advice to the adults that were around you
Right
that they
now,
should have at that time? So like the adults that were around little Dennis, what should they have heard? So what should little Dennis have heard, and what should the adults have heard?
all I wanted around that time is when the only adults that were around me were my parents, obviously, right? Because keep in mind, it was just us three. right? It's not like we had a huge network. And I remember quickly, we did live with my uncle, but he was busy. He was working corporate job at Dillard, so he was very, very tied up. But all little Dennis wanted to hear was, "I understand you," or "Let me try to understand you in a different way," because all I got was the "Do as you're told." This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. This is your lottery ticket. But essentially, it cost me my dignity in so many ways, you know? And as a kid, you don't even know that that's your dignity. It just feels like, bro, like, yeah, it's like I was deprived of a normal childhood. I was deprived of like probably the best childhood, right? Because think about where I was, right? Where we were. We were in the best education that money could possibly buy. But for me, that experience was, if I could put a metric on it, it was like 90% shit, 10% like happy, and I can only remember like certain happy moments, and honestly, most of them were off campus. But it was with people that like genuinely at one point were like, dude, like, I'm sorry that this was going on. And again, I don't want to put any names out there, but I remember there was like a handful of people, especially like my late sophomore, junior, and senior year. They just, I started to share a little bit more about what was happening to me then, and they were just like, shit, man, like, you can come hang out with us. you know and that's what I did. So anyway, so all little Dennis wanted to hear was, it's going to be okay. What can I do? Like, what will make you happy? And the only advice that I could give to the adults around that time were just to zoom out. I guess that's not really advice, but it's more of a, I think honestly, it's something that I've used personally more than anything nowadays, to zoom out, and that's an ideology I think that I'm starting to try to do.
Elaborate on that.
Well, you know how like whenever something bad happens to you, and then you're just locked in, zoomed in, and you're just looking at things. If this is my problem, right, and it hits you square in the face, all you can do is just do this, right, and all you want to do is just trying to figure out what the solution is, right. But the zoom out thing is this, because when you zoom out, you're able to see a lot more things, right? And so for me, the zooming out thing has helped me honestly quite a bit in the last couple of months, because especially when I start to react to certain triggering moments that take me back to those times, I will close my eyes and I will legit physically think like I'm stepping back and trying to, almost as if I have an aerial view of the world, and try to figure out, hey, like, yeah, this sucks, right? But then this will pass, and then if it bothers me in the next hour, okay, it might be something to consider. If it bothers me in the next day, definitely something. But then chances are, listen, and I'm sure you've been this, and I can think of so many moments in my life where I was thinking, oh hell, this is it. Like, this is how my life is going to be the rest. And then a week goes by, and you're like, why did I stress out over that? You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So the zoom out thing again
I
should,
like
I
that.
think, helps most adults nowadays.
I like that, man. I
Yeah.
like that. Zoom out. All right. Got a segment. Just a quick rapid response, a couple
Uh-huh.
questions. And the first thing that comes to your mind. You
Okay.
don't have to overthink it. If you want to elaborate, you can, but you
Yeah.
don't have to do that as well. So all right, here we go. What comes to mind when you hear the word vulnerability?
Weakness.
If you could have a conversation with anyone living or dead, who would it be?
My parents. And I'll say this why, because for the longest time I could give you, obviously, I guess with our educational backgrounds, I could give you, I could say like Napoleon or something like that. I could give you a whole, academic reasons to why. But that's changed quite a bit now. The reason why I would like to be my parents, because I would really like closure, like proper closure. Because I know that they're not in a good place right now themselves either, because I know that they lost, or they felt like they've lost their son, and they just have Dennis now. And then, and in that conversation, I would just ask questions that obviously I think all of us who struggle with relationships with parents, especially the mother, right? Because my mom was the one that obviously raised me, and I saw her on the daily, and I just wonder, like nowadays in particular, it sucks to say, but I genuinely don't know what they like, what their interests are. What if I could ask my mom any question, I would just be like, what's your happiest memory ever? Same thing for my dad. Um, because again, the lives that they have lived, man, they pretty much lived for everyone else. They never really were allowed to live their life. They thought that the life that they lived was supposed to be this big payout for me, but again, it didn't happen. And so, for a lot of families that face family uh, that family break, I would say, I went like this, but it's a break. Um, I just know that a lot of people hurt, and then they think that it's okay to normalize that. They start going, oh, it's okay. Your moms are like that, or like dads are like that, and you have to set boundaries. And so for me, it's hard too, because honestly, bro, I never heard that until I came to this country. But yeah, my parents.
Man, that's so powerful, bro. Like I usually the rapid responses aren't usually that long, but that needed that
Yeah.
space. And it's interesting that you said that that you wish you could ask them, their happiest memory. Because my next question is, what is one of your favorite childhood memories?
I was probably like 6 or 7, and it was the time that my dad came and visited us, after like a year of visiting us in Ecuador. Right now, one of the things that I should note, and obviously this is incredible, and because I just want this at some point to be on record, right? Just so that at some point, even if my dad gets a chance to watch this, he'll understand that I do respect and I love what he did. But I do know that since he was able to start visiting us, he would come at least twice a month to visit Ecuador. Just and here's why it's important,
Twice a
because
month, you said? Wow.
twice a month, and he did it on the weekends. But in particular, he did it. He would visit late Friday night. We would go pick him up. He would stay there Saturday, and then he would leave Sunday morning, because he had to be back at his shift. At the time, he was working a lot of odd jobs, honestly, just to try to make ends meet. But he would go back Sunday to be ready to work, and then he would fly, by the way, to see us right after working like the 24 hours nonstop. So all that to say, this because to your question, my fondest memory of it being in Ecuador was when he came, and it was the first time that I remember they invited him to play soccer. Now, one of the things about my dad, he actually went pro when he was younger, and unfortunately, due to tragic a truck accident that ended up breaking his leg in different places, he had to stop. But the one time that I remember feeling like proud, almost as if I'm watching like a superhero, right? Was when I was watching an adult game that the whole community put together, right? And I remember specifically it was to raise money so that we could all, as a community, could go to the beach and by renting a bus. Now, and all that to me was important because my dad decided to step in and volunteer. Now, for him, it was hard to just even touch a ball because to him that was triggering, right? If you could imagine, because he had all these hopes and dreams, and his lottery ticket was soccer. But then all of a sudden, overnight, gone. But I remember the first time that he ever played in front of me, he had this beautiful goal, like just amazing, amazing goal. And if I could describe it to the non like soccer followers, he took everyone from like defense by himself. Nobody could stop him. He even beat the keeper. Now he could have easily just chipped it, lobbed it over. He decided to go an extra step, like magical, like out of nowhere. Turns around, is able to flick the ball without even looking. Keep in mind the goal is behind him. He flicks the ball and then uses the back heel to chip it over the keeper. About I would have said maybe 50 people were watching. They went wild. They went nuts. They raided the field. I remember they picked him up. When I looked at him, And the reason why this is important to me now, just, and I'm going to try to control myself.
You're human, man. It's okay.
His face, the way he reacted to that, it was like, in my mind, I could almost picture like that's probably what he wanted out of life, to feel like that all the time. And then because life did him wrong for whatever reason, right? And had to break his leg. All that was taken away. So for me, the reason why that was a memory is because I wish, and I always told myself, I wish there would be a day when I could look at him like that again, and like he could also have the same look like that again. And it's been what, 34 years now that I'm alive. I haven't seen that look, you know. So it's that like sense of, yeah, it's a sense of, it's a sense of defeat, it's a sense of failure that I have with from that, because I always thought that, with NBA, with Vandy, that maybe I could give him that look again, but even then it wasn't good, it wasn't good enough, which then, consequently led me to feel like I was never going to be good enough for anybody. And so that to me is a big struggle to this day, and this is me talking to you as a father, talking to you as somebody that has a wonderful partner at home. There are days, and I'm sure you can relate, where we just don't feel like we're good enough for anybody.
Yeah, man.
And it doesn't matter how many times people tell us that we love you, we care about you, we're here for you. If it's here and it can take over your physical body, you're done, you know? And so there are days where I feel like I'm done, and then, I have to really, really, really crawl out of bed, and when I say crawl out of bed, I do mean like I don't necessarily feel like I need to be in a bed to feel like I got to crawl out of bed. I could be here, bro. There are days here in my private office here in Franklin, and I'm just like, and I'm looking around pictures, and I'm going like, am I doing the best that I could possibly do? Am I, am I failing them in some way that I'm overlooking, Because to me, that's my biggest haunting fear, ghost, is that my dad, when you ask me who would you like to talk to, is because my father and I specifically, especially nowadays, he struggles with that, with not realizing that he missed a lot of things that he should have caught early on, and so yeah, man.
Damn. That you hit a lot, man. I want to say one thing, like more than one thing, but you're enough. You are
Thank you.
love. You are a special human being for so many great reasons. And I'm
Thank you.
blessed to know you.
Same.
And yeah, man, like what you're doing and where you are in life is where you should be. And it is beautiful.
Thank
So, couple more questions, man. Couple
you.
more. What is a book or movie that everyone should read or watch?
Yeah. Oof. Okay. You know what? I'm trying to think, because I'm wondering if they made it into a movie. The book, everyone. So okay, I'll answer with the book. The book is the boy, the fox, the mole, and the horse.
Hey, say that again.
You have that?
Got it right
Okay.
here, bro. This is one of my favorite books ever, bro. This is one of
Yeah.
my favorite
Yeah.
books. Like, God, I didn't even plan that. Like,
Yeah. See, like, oh, okay, so everybody knows that wasn't planned, and it's only because, and as of recent, over the last month, I actually started putting some pages of that on my social media pages,
mm,
with no
that's
explanations to it,
good.
right? Just little, because it's one of those books, and for those of you that don't know, it's a quick read. It's, I guess, essentially targeted as a children's book. But if you struggle, and I get, and I hope, and if there is somebody out there that can tell me and look at me in my face that they don't struggle with anything from their past, I would love to know that person. um, because again, that book, you can just pick it up just about anywhere in the book, and you will learn something right away. And honestly, it's one of those, because I can think, obviously, in my field, I was political science and economics major. I can think of other books where you pick them up and you just be like, oh man, I feel like 100 times smarter. Well, this one in particular, you feel 100 times more healed. You know, does that make sense? Because to me, it was that. It was, think about it. Every character in that book represents somebody that you know, and honestly, like for me, it represents me in certain stages of my life. And when I say that it represents certain stages in my life, because of the what I've shared with you today, I always felt like I had to, especially in my high school years, college not so much, honestly, because I do remember I felt like I found my community, my niche, right? And I naturally gravitated to. Well, you and I know I walked on the football team, so but I only did it for 1 year, and from that alone, I got along with a lot of football players there, right? And something to note there is, obviously, because of my color skin, I naturally gravitated to people that were similar in color, which happened to be a lot of black football players, and so those naturally became my better friends in college. But anyway, so going back to the book, yeah, man, and I'm sure you know this. I feel like that book represents my life in a very simple manner, because I've had to essentially morph into different personalities just to get by. And when I say just to get by, it's legitimately, I mean, to be able to live at least one more day,
Mm,
you
mm.
know?
That's
And
beautiful,
so,
bro.
yeah,
I
so for
love
me, that,
that.
that book
That's so beautiful.
represents a lot of me just being able to kind of, yeah, basically act like a chameleon in a lot of environments. Because again, like, if whoever's watching this, right, and I hope it's somebody from NBA out there that knew me, and I always felt like it's going to be, I always hope that it was that one person that caused me harm. Like, the person that you like targeted then and you thought was funny, you didn't even like meet the real me. That was the persona that I had to develop, right? So that I could just withstand whatever BS came my way. So again, it's interesting because, again, I never became my true self until, man, honestly, until I've started to become a father, and accepting that responsibility, which is how we started the talk here. Once when I started to accept responsibilities, right? And so in my mind, and maybe I could go back to this one, the word of advice I could give little Dennis, is hey, like, accept your responsibility, right? Because even though I had like shit circumstances, and we both did, I honestly don't think that either one of us had somebody going, accept your responsibility. And our responsibility then was just to be students. That was it. So yeah, man. I hope that answers the question. And then you mentioned a movie.
No, it was either or. It was either
Oh,
or.
okay.
So, what is one thing you do to relax when you're feeling stressed?
That, now, honestly, we touched on it. I usually just try to find a quiet spot right away. I cannot be surrounded by loud noises. So, but even my children are obviously yelling, but most of the time, I have to be able to excuse me. Papi's gonna go outside, or I gotta go upstairs, and I'll just find a quiet spot, close my eyes, and again, visually, like, picture myself like zooming out of the world, and then trying to figure out what else matters right now that I could tackle, because clearly what's stressing me out right now is out of my control, right?
Wow. Wow. That's dope. That's perspective change right there. You, if they want to, learn more about what you're doing today, and you can talk about
Yeah.
that, but any ways that they can contact you.
Well, my primary ways, and this is something that personally. I'm on IG like often. I post something at least once or twice a day. And you can find me at Roni the Great on that.
Spell that.
Roni, Roni, and then the Great all together. You'll see me right there. My social media is particularly dedicated, and honestly stems right around the time that we reconnected. But I made it a lot about being physically active, which obviously just has a lot of tremendous health benefits. But for those of you that would want to check it out, I mean, you can kind of see how it transformed over the last, maybe, what, 3 years now, because it started off just as a workout thing, and then it became more about feel. I use a lot of audio, not music, but I use a lot of inspirational audio to go along with the workouts, because to me workouts became honestly my way out now. Not my way out, wrong way to phrase that. it was just it was a coping mechanism, but I always knew that that was just a coping mechanism. It was not my answer. It wasn't a solution, because, and I want to make sure that people understand that, because, and particularly thinking of a couple of people in the fitness industry that obviously promote that as like, if you're struggling with this, then get in the gym and your problems will be solved. No, man, like you'll
Right.
get stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Man,
it. I mean, the
preach.
physical consequences will happen. But if this isn't, again, I always go back. If something is here in your mind and you let it take over, your physical body means nothing. I'm sure you know. I know. I can think of about 3 people right now that can bench press about 1,000 pounds easy. Like there's like I can bench press this phone, probably. But they're broken, and they're very broken, and they do not talk about their feelings. They don't want to acknowledge anything that happened in their past,
A
and they
lot of
just think
times
that.
that brokenness fuels that strength
Yeah,
training.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But I just always caution people to make sure that they don't get caught up in that. What they think is a solution is not a solution. It's a way to manage, I would say. So for me, that's what my Instagram represents. I think it's a way that to show people that there are ways, very healthy ways, that you can manage everything. Not a solution, though. I want to be very clear for viewers. These are not solutions. These are just ways to manage and be more effective, and basically be ahead of the problems, right? And yeah, but pretty much you'll see that I pretty much work out every day. Now I'm into coaching. I also post about that. And I mostly did coaching for me myself, because that I had my soccer experience in high school wasn't the best because of the things that we talked about. And for me, now that I get to basically coach with the coach that coached me when I was in an MBA. And the reason why I did that, and this is something that is full circle for me, is because he was the only one that believed in me and actually asked me, trust me, stay with the program, and trust me, you will be rewarded, essentially, right, with your hard work. By then I was too broken. I was too I think I lost faith in people, and I just walked away. And then obviously it took almost 20 years later for me to reconnect with the coach, and obviously he welcomed me with open arms, especially Gabriel now, who technically he coaches him in the summers. But yeah, man. So for me, it's a full circle thing that's
That's
that's going
beautiful.
on for me.
Man, Dennis, with all the things that you could be doing and all the places you could be, I appreciate you being here with me, embracing vulnerability.
Thank you,
Appreciate you,
bro. I
bro, man.
appreciate you.
That was
Number love.
love.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us for another powerful episode of Vulnerability Muscle. I hope you found inspiration and valuable insights that resonate with you. If you're enjoying this journey of self-discovery and empowerment, there are a few ways you can support the podcast. First, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. If you've been moved by our conversations and the mission of redefining vulnerability, please consider leaving a review. Your feedback not only motivates us, but also helps others discover the podcast. Share your thoughts on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in. And don't forget to spread the word. Follow us on Instagram at Vulnerability Muscle for updates, and you can connect with me personally at Reggie D Ford on all platforms. Visit vulnerabilitymuscle.com for additional resources and upcoming episodes. And remember, embracing vulnerability is strength. Thanks for being a part of the journey. Until next time, stay empowered, stay vulnerable, and keep flexing that vulnerability muscle.